Aloha, folks. This is going to be a fast session. But we wanted to respond to some audience comments we've gotten the last few years. Essentially, people were saying, hey, how come we never get your opinions of some of the people on the program committee? So we're trying this as an experiment, and each of the members here is going to go around and answer a question geared towards something that we're seeing here that is a good solution, or something that is being done in another place that we should be considering in Hawaii. We're going to start with Colton, Ching and then move down.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So over the course of the last couple of days, I've heard a lot of comments from panelists and speakers around the challenges in developing renewable energy projects, yet the need to accelerate their development, issues around permitting, issues around land, the process to obtain community acceptance of projects. And it got me to thinking of, in preparation for this panel, that, I think one way to potentially help with this issue is to approach the siting of projects differently than what we have in the past as a practice, which is kind of everybody go on their own, try to find their best site, compete with each other for the development of a project. And as Doug said, we want to keep one eye towards what others are doing in other countries or in other states. And a pretty common practice in other places is to make that process of siting energy projects sort of more formal, more structured, and to be done in advance of the development of the projects themselves. So we looked at this as part of our integrated grid plan. I think we can do more around things like designating the right areas and going through the process to determine what those right areas are and where renewable projects should be sited, right? And we should be looking at places that traditionally have been places, but also places that haven't, like state lands and federal lands, because here in Hawaii, that represents such a big portion of the land on our islands. And then take the time, go through a complete and thorough process to figure out where, as a community and as a society, we want to place these energy projects. Then as a utility, we can come in, develop the interconnections, the transmission lines to get to the area, and then we'll do procurements, right? We'll do RFPs and have developers do what they do best, which is to develop low-cost, low-risk renewable projects on these different sites. So places like California and Texas in particular have done this. And I think there's a lot that we in Hawaii can learn from that.
Right. So California and Texas were the two places you were looking at as having something to offer specifically?
Right, where they've designated places, we want you to develop wind here, right? And the utilities, we want you to build transmission from these locations over to where your customers are.
Got it. Next, we're going to ask Jonathan Koehn to speak.
I told Doug that it was really unfair to only give me 4 minutes to say anything, but I'm going to do my best, Doug. So first, I want to take a little bit of my valuable time and just thank the three of you. It's been a true pleasure serving on this committee with the three of you. I cannot believe that it has been 12 years since we have been doing this. And you continue to invite the random Colorado guy back every year, so maybe that's something about your own judgment. I made a joke that I am really grateful that none of us have aged, except for maybe Doug. I think your hair was dark maybe when we started this. Maybe, all right. Well, I'm going to take a little bit different approach, and I wanted to think a little bit with you all about some of the things that I have heard over the past day and a half and leading out of the last couple of years. And, I think the last day we've really been deep in the technical and the legal and in the financial complexities of our energy transition. But I'd like to invite us to think about why we're doing this work in the first place. And I think that's a really important place to pause. It's not just about renewables and filling the gap. And even though that invokes the inner math geek in all of us, I just want to say that it's about people, it's about place, and it's about building a future that's more resilient and that's more equitable and more rooted in the natural systems that support us. And so we talk a lot about the 100% targets, not just here in Hawaii, but in many of the jurisdictions that some of us come from, and that's important. But I think we need to be really careful that we don't let the target become the story. And what I mean by that is our definition of success, if our definition of success is only about hitting a number by a certain year, I think we risk missing the bigger picture. So look, Hawaii has made incredible progress, y'all. You have, in fact, gone from early adopters to global examples. You have changed what's possible. You've engaged with your communities. You've shown what's possible in integrating renewables and isolated systems. You've shown what equity and community ownership actually looks like. And that is not a milestone at all. That is a movement. And I think that I say this because I heard a couple of times over the past day or two that we have so far to go. I heard that earlier today. And I just want to invite us to think together about how we reframe that narrative from how far we have to go to how far we've come. And that's really important for me because we have come a long way. Hawaii has come a long way, and you need to continue to be that leader that I think many of us look to. And let's keep doing the work. Let's do it with heart, let's do it with some humor, and let's maybe do it with a little bit less caffeine-induced panic. So that's all I got.
Well, tough act to follow there, but I'm going to go ahead and try and offer a couple of comments. I want to save most of my time to talk about an idea similar to what Colton's talking about, but there's one other thing that's kind of come up, and it's become clear to me that folks in Hawaii aren't really following some of the things that have happened in the Chinese EV market, and in particular what people need to be aware of. You may have seen some headlines about 5-minute charging, and finally some Western crews, media were able to go over and check this out. And basically what we're finding is that it is real that they do have 5-minute chargers, that BYD is showing this, but the way they're getting there is, number one, the voltage for these vehicles is now going to be 800 volts or higher. And secondly, the sheer amount of power going through. You know, if you know how it works with electricity, and it's kind of a three-way relationship, right? There's voltage, there's amps, there's watts. And they are doing 1 megawatt chargers running at 800 volts. And the reason I'm raising this in the Hawaii Energy Conference is you heard yesterday, utility scale on the neighbor islands has traditionally been viewed as 5 megawatts. If you start thinking about a fast charger with 2 or 3 heads coming in at a megawatt, you'll see that we have been installing these all wrong in Hawaii. We are putting them on distribution circuits. That's all we've really, focused on in Hawaii. And I just wanted to throw out there and have people thinking that if we want to be following the Chinese model, we really are going to have to be thinking about the voltages and interconnecting to transmission potentially rather than distribution for fast chargers. So that's just a specific comment I wanted to make. But the bigger kind of message, I think, is really consistent with what Colton was saying. I've been watching this for a while, and I am fundamentally concerned that we are asking the Hawaii PUC to do too much. And specifically, what I'm seeing is that currently there is a big push on both the energy side, but also in terms of Young Brothers. So if you do business here in the neighbor islands, you know that Young Brothers is a lifeblood. And they're talking about a 27, 28% rate increase. So that's incredibly important to everyone here in the neighbor islands. And it just emphasizes that the PUC is being asked to handle these really, really difficult and broad-ranging things. So when we look at other states, one of the obvious things that you can do is have an energy commission. You could also do kind of a lighter version of that, kind of what Colton's saying, and we could have some best practices, and we could have some locations that had been pre-selected so that our PUC doesn't have to keep re-litigating, redeciding some of these basic things. But to me, we see the ledge on this latest, the wildlife bill, it's 897, and It said very specifically they were demanding that the PUC treat things arising under that bill as a super priority. In essence, drop everything else you're doing and prioritize this. So the reason I think you're seeing that is people sensing that we're just asking folks to do too much. So again, you could well separate out the common carrier functions and leave the remainder as an energy commission. And to me, that would be something that we should at least consider. And now I'm going to turn it over to Jacqui for our final commentary.
Thank you. So my comments really kind of encompass everything that I've been hearing over the last day and a half, as well as what my three colleagues here have been speaking about. And that is that we continue to use this conference as an opportunity to have those really difficult, awkward discussions. And more than ever this year, I feel that we need to use those difficult, awkward discussions to get past some of the sound bites and rhetoric that we're exposed to. So, it's a good sound bite, utilities versus customers, we versus them, ag versus energy and land use and so forth. And certainly our customers, our consumer base, are frustrated by the high costs as well as the complexity. But I would ask that instead of us focusing on the difference and the versus part of the conversation, that we start looking at what do we have singularity, common impact on, common belief in. And really, when we think about it, we have a shared goal. We all want to have, and this is amongst the regulators, the utilities, and the customers, we all want to have ratepayers provided with safe, reliable, clean energy at a reasonable cost. And if we could find that as our common point of impact, we can then identify better ways to collaborate, partner, work together. We are in a situation now, or in a time, I should say, when we recognize that resources are at an all-time low. We can't depend on the traditional sources of funding that we've been reliant on. So we need to identify and recognize that we have finite resources. How do we leverage and maximize those resources if, in fact, we don't recognize that we are all on this journey together? It's utilities and customers, utilities and regulators, customers and regulators, customers and policymakers, and customers and all of you in this room, because all of you have one or more customers that you're working with. So let's figure out how do we do the and versus the versus. And I would ask that you all continue to take these conversations outside of these rooms and really continue to have those difficult, awkward conversations that really are going to help us push our sector and clean energy and all of our goals forward, rather than continuing to stay in place and doing the status quo. Thank you so much.
And just as a quick follow-up, is there any country or state that you would point to and say they're closer to where we want to end up?
Certainly some of the European countries, they're doing this better. They have more alignment between their consumer base and their regulated utilities. And I think one of the problems we have here is terminology. We talk about monopoly all the time. And as soon as we hear the word monopoly, we immediately think, ooh, negative. But in fact, there's a good reason for having opportunities, or not reason. There's good opportunities there to work with what we perceive as a monopolistic positioning of our utility. And that means we have one less or less people to have to work with, and that should bring us closer together. And I guess the other thing I should say is Hawaii is unique in that more than, and I've lived around the world in multiple countries and cultures, we really truly are more relationship-based than any other place I've ever lived. And when you're relationship-based, we need to identify that not only are we relationship-based here in Hawaii, but we are an island state. Why then would we even consider burning bridges when we're surrounded by water? And we tend to do that in multiple sectors, including the way we look at energy. We need to recognize it's relationship-based. We're on this journey together, on this island together. How do we make this work? And we versus them is not the way to do it. So thank you.
Well, folks, we promised you a fast session, and I think we're going to honor that. So we're going to wrap up. We would appreciate any feedback. Is this format something that we should do in the future, expand in any way? And maybe not. You tell us. But anyway, we appreciate the time, and we'll move on to the next panel. Thank you.